A net lease is a contractual agreement where the leasee pays the rent in addition to property costs that the owner would usually pay. Knowing the different lease types and how they work in real estate is essential to passing the real estate exam. So if you want to pass your real estate exam, you're in the right place. Hello everybody, it's Zach here from realestatelicensewizard.com. Today we're talking about net leases. Let's get started. So what is a net lease? Well, a net lease is an agreement where the leasee pays for rent plus additional property expenses. In a net lease structure, the tenant is responsible for costs related to the property as if they were the actual owner. This is the opposite of a gross lease, where the tenant pays one flat fee that covers all additional costs. The exact costs a tenant is responsible for in a net lease do vary depending on which type of net lease agreement that the leasee signs. An example of additional property costs would include maybe property insurance fees, maintenance and repair costs, and property taxes, things like that. Now, why is it called a net lease? Well, these agreements are called net leases because the leasee receives the rent, or quote unquote net, after the lessor pays additional expenses. Think of the rent money passing through the holes of a net to the lessor, while the additional expenses get trapped in the net's ropes. Now, what exactly are these net leases used for? Well, they're pretty popular in commercial real estate. Commercial real estate refers to property that tenants use for gross-related purposes. Examples of commercial property would include warehouses, office buildings, assembly plants, shopping centers, industrial properties. Really, any commercial building would fit into that category. Now, this brings us to the 5 types of net leases. Real estate professionals need to know these. So there's a single, double, triple, bond, and modified net lease. So let's go over these. A single net lease requires that the tenant pays rent and property taxes. Because the tenant pays taxes directly to the property owner, the single net lease offers the least amount of risk. In a single net lease, the property owner is still responsible for paying insurance, plus the cost of maintenance and repairs. Next is the double net lease. A double net lease is an agreement where the tenant pays rent, property taxes, and insurance. The tax and insurance costs are paid directly to the property owner, which helps lower the tenant's risk factors. In a double net lease agreement, the landlord still pays for maintenance and repairs. And then, of course, there's the triple net lease, or the NNN lease. A triple net lease requires that the tenant pays rent, property taxes, insurance, and additional expenses. The only costs that landlords must pay for a triple net lease are maintenance of the property's roof and structure. Of all the net lease types, the triple net lease is the most common, offering benefits for lessors, lessees, and investors. Now, there is that bond net lease, or an absolute net lease, which is essentially an agreement that requires the tenant also pay for maintenance of the property's roof and structure. For example, if a hurricane were to come and destroy the property, the leasee would be responsible for reconstruction costs. This type of net lease is the riskiest for tenants, as they are responsible for all property expenses. And then, of course, there's the modified net lease. In a modified net lease, the lessor and leasee agree on special terms that suit both of their needs. This is essentially a hybrid version of the previous ones that we talked about. So what terms are specifically covered in a net lease agreement? Well, I'll put the list on the screen. There's quite a few names of the tenant occupying the unit, occupancy limits, terms of length of the agreement, rent, fees, deposits, maintenance, costs, legal rights, and much more. Now, there are pros and cons to net leases. For landlords, net leases are beneficial for landlords looking to make passive income. With triple net leases, the owner has fewer responsibilities regarding property management. They can essentially sit back and enjoy the tax benefits of owning multiple properties. However, net leases typically have longer terms, which means the price remains fixed up to 10 to possibly even 15 years. This means landlords cannot increase rent prices even if market conditions change. Now, for tenants, of course, the fixed rate is highly beneficial for lessees. They never have to worry about changing lease terms. The biggest problem with net leases for tenants is that they are responsible for property maintenance. If something breaks, it's up to the tenant to fix it. And check out this table below over the advantages and disadvantages, just some more ones. I'll just leave it on the screen for a couple moments, but essentially there are pros and cons to both of these things. So who specifically should use these net leases? Well, considering these pros and cons, net leases work best for the following types of people. Someone with good credit history, someone renting property for maybe even like office space, tenants who want more flexibility and control over the property, commercial real estate investors, and of course landlords who just want to make passive income. Now, if you'd like to see some examples of net leases in real estate, you really don't have to look far. Examples of popular triple net lease companies include McDonald's, Taco Bell, a Walgreens, Dollar General, CVS, AutoZone. These companies rent out spaces where they can run their businesses using a triple net lease. McDonald's, the popular fast food chain restaurant, is considered one of the safest investments for commercial real estate investors. With its strong credit history and competitive advantage, investors who sign a triple net lease with McDonald's receive a steady income stream and help build their portfolio. In return, McDonald's can occupy these spaces for long periods while enjoying a fixed rate regardless of changing market conditions. Leases interested in taking on-net loans must possess certain qualities that lenders look for. While lenders have different qualifications, most must adhere to the 5 C's of credit, which are capacity, capital, collateral, conditions, and character. I won't go too much in detail to these because it's not really part of this video, but essentially all they are doing is making sure that these leases, credit history, background, they have the capital, collateral, and whatnot to afford these things. So I mentioned earlier a gross lease a little bit briefly, and we're going to be talking about that soon, probably in the next video. But essentially, you do have to understand the difference between these two terms, gross lease and net lease. Under a gross lease, the tenant pays a single fee that covers both rent and property expenses. This means that if a rented property has maintenance issues, again, the lessor is responsible for paying repair costs. This is unlike a net lease, which requires the lessee to pay for maintenance, repairs, and other operational costs. So one question I do get asked all the time is how specifically the math works behind these net leases. Lessors can calculate a net lease by providing property taxes, insurance, maintenance costs, and common area expenses, then dividing by 12. This provides monthly cost. In properties with multiple tenants, lessors add the monthly cost to the monthly rental rate per square footage. Then they multiply the number by square feet for each tenant that is leasing it. So what specifically do you need to know for the real estate exam? Well, you need to know that a net lease is a contractual agreement where the tenant pays for rent and additional property expenses. Lessors can offer lessees 5 different net lease agreement types, and really just depends on what's going on, the situation, and what both parties want to do, in terms of offering that type of lease. Now, you have to be familiar with this for the real estate exam, and hopefully now you understand it. For more videos on leases, property management, and all that good stuff, click the video here and click here to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, see ya. Bye-bye.